freight efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
Joining us in episode 96 is Jason Mathers. He's a director at the Environmental Defense Fund, where we talk about the history of EDF, what it is currently focusing on, and his commitment to problem solving. He also talks about what he loves about working in the trucking industry, the progress we've made on reducing emissions, and the distance we still have to go. He also offers advice on emissions policies and regulations. Today we have joining us Jason Mathers. He's a director at the Environmental Defense Fund. Often we just call it EDF. Welcome, Jason. Excited to have you on today.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so we're longtime friends, Jason, and I think you're doing personally and EDF doing great work in trucking, but I'm not so sure, the broader trucking audience probably sees it all. So I'm looking forward to this time together to kind of, really learn what Environmental Defense Fund does and how you view trucking at the same time. So I always start with, asking my guests how we became friends. You got a month and a year or some kind of idea or a place that we struck up a friendship?
RMI hosted the gathering in Chicago that was it the charrette, like the second charrette that really was one of those launch stones to NACFE.
That goes back a little farther than what I was thinking. So yeah, in 07, 08, I was working at Navistar on advanced fuel economy and technology features, and it could have even been back then. So let's dig right in. Environmental Defense Fund, EDF. How old is the organization? You're defending the environment. But tell us about it and maybe something that we don't already know.
Yeah, so EDF is a little over 50 years old. Was founded on Long Island in New York by a combination of bird watchers. Some were scientists, some were lawyers, and were really concerned about the osprey populations and the impacts of DDT. So that was kind of our origin story. Now EDF's a global environmental organization working on what we see as the most critical environmental issues of our time, with a lot of focus on stabilizing the climate and working to support healthy communities. We're over 1,000 people. We're in dozens of countries. I think that within the environmental space, I like to think of our EDF as a kind of a full service ENGO, in the fact that we do a bit of everything. We do research and analytics, we do legal defense, we do direct advocacy with policymakers, and we have partnerships with companies and support communities that are most impacted. I am in the work of the Truck Initiative in the U.S., where we're working at the federal level and the state level on policy progress, and also doing a lot of work with fleets and communities to drive forward on zero emission vehicles.
You've kind of made a career of this, right? I mean, what drove you to get into this and stay in it? I saw, I didn't know this for sure, but I saw that you started your career or early in your career, you were with Union of Concerned Scientists, and now 20 years at EDF. I mean, what is it about this? I mean, did you know as a young boy you were going to do this, or how did it all come to be?
In high school, I had deeply wanted to be able to buy a Jeep, and my mother, in her good wisdom, thought that was a horrible idea. And my dad had a compromise, which was he had an old MG Midget in the out in the shed that had been sitting around for about 10 years, and he said I could have that if I could get on the road. And it took about a year, but I got on the road. And I started from a point of probably not knowing, a flathead from a Phillips, right? But along the way, I did develop a knack for understanding systems and problem solving. And so, I feel like everything I've done since then has really been around problem solving. I was in the Navy for 4 years after high school, and that really helped give me both the perspective that I want to do mission-driven work, and also the space to reflect on where I wanted that to be. And I think that was the time when focusing on energy and climate issues really became clear to me as a step that I wanted to take in my career. And when I got out of the Navy and went to school for it, and then ended up at the initial job at UCS and making my way over to EDF almost 20 years ago.
And well, first of all, thank you for your service. And I have to say that this work has become, in those 20 years, and maybe there's a question for you here, but I think the answer is yes, that this trucking work in those 20 years has become more and more on sort of the front burner rather than the back burner. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been uh almost 20 years since greenhouse gas phase one. Phase two was final in 2016, if I remember. So that's like 8 years ago. And now we've got we got phase three in front of us. And it feels like trucking continues on this regulatory pathway, but also a sustainability and business pathway, to match it. And I want to give you a compliment right now, and that is you do a really good job of bridging across a wide range of opinions and biases and approaches. I mean, we don't find that too often where somebody can do what you do, Jason, and have the network you have from industry folks all the way to regulators, and you mentioned even legal aspects of things. So congratulations on that. It's not easy to get.
One of the things I've really appreciated in the journey that I've been on is everyone who I'm interacting with are mission driven in their own ways, right? I think we're all trying to leave our kids a better world. And so I think it's really important to have that understanding, to be grounded in the respect and importance of what everybody is doing.
And I find trucking is really important, right? I mean, it gets us
Yeah,
what
yeah,
not just what we want, not just what we want in Christmas presents and that sort of thing, but what we
yeah.
actually need in food and clothing and medicines and so forth. So
I'd love to kind of build on that a little bit, right? Because I do feel like it's one of the things I really love about working on trucking is that it is grounded in the here and now, right? Like the folks that we're working with, there's critical things that they have to do today, right, to get the products delivered. And I think this is even broad. This is, I would say, probably throughout the whole freight industry, right? So there's an immediacy and a practicality that has to ground the conversations.
So let me ask you specifically, EDF's work in trucking. I mean, how do you decide what to work on? What's your approach to decarbonizing? And let me put a little
Yeah,
focus on what I'm asking this. I mean, there's some NGOs that are all about zero emission or bust.
yeah,
We're only working on electric trucks or hydrogen fuel cell trucks. And we need to get there really fast, and that gets us to zero.
yeah,
Then there's the different ones that are working on alternative fuels and
yeah.
renewable fuels that still have maybe engines powering them, and even just what we do here at NACFE is working on energy efficiency technologies, aerodynamics, and idle reduction, and speed and management, and all that to burn less fuel. You burn less fuel, you create less carbon, right?
Yeah.
But not every group, different groups have different focus. So specifically with EDF, how do you choose what to work on across all of those efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we start, for us, it's about human health, right? And so we really start with the local air pollution, right? And so, the local air pollution and climate change are both important impacts of the freight sector, writ large in trucking. And so, I think that is we've made tremendous progress with specifically with the trucking industry on reducing emissions, local air pollutants, from vehicles, and there's still huge issues with diesel pollution, right? That leads to all kinds of human health consequences, such as low birth weight, occurrences of pediatric asthma, lung cancer, and other ills. And so, as an environmental organization, we start with how do we get better outcomes for people? We are primarily in the U.S. focused on zero emission. And we are also, within EDF, doing work on sustainable fuels, I think with a pretty specific focus on the maritime and aviation industries, and then also working with communities to, drive down pollution in their neighborhoods from, ports and warehouses and other logistics facilities.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up maritime and shipping. One of the advantages, one of the like assets and liabilities of trucking is that trucks have a pretty short life compared to planes and trains and boats. Trucks, 10-year really strong life. I mean, they may still move around with lower miles in agriculture or traditionally drayage or other places, but they get the vast majority of their miles in the first 10 years. So that's a
Yeah.
good thing in that we can turn over that fleet. If
Yes.
every truck
Yes.
was electric in 10 years, they'd all would be, or if half of the new trucks are electric, it's only takes 20 years
Sure.
to turn over the whole population. So that's pretty quick. But on the other hand, it's kind of hard to measure progress.
Yes.
If oftentimes I'll see an environmental group continue to show a heavy truck with bellowing black smoke coming out of it, and I'm like, I tend to call them up on it and say, hey,
Yep.
that truck is basically gone. There are very few of those that exist anymore. So,
Sure.
we can make progress quickly, and I guess that brings up a challenge of how we recognize improvements in the industry
Yeah.
while still working hard because we've got a long way to go, specifically on carbon. We've made a fair amount of
Yes.
progress on NOx and PM and
Yeah.
other things. Is
Yeah.
that how you would describe it?
It's important both to recognize the progress we've made in the distance we have remaining. And so I think that on both, right, on the criteria emissions, I think we've made tremendous progress reducing emissions from new vehicles. And we have a lot of progress still to be made in the fact that, even those new vehicles have significant impacts and their operations are concentrated. Right. And then of course there's the legacy fleet. Both things can be true. This industry has made tremendous progress over 30 years, and there's a lot of progress left to go. For greenhouse gas emissions, I think we've made great progress, like you said, since GHG1 went in, and 10 years ago to now. I think personally, it's amazing for me to be sitting here in 2024. And that, there are, a few thousand electric trucks on the road, that there is a still challenging, but viable pathway to scale up zero emission solutions over the next, 10 to 15 years. A decade ago, that didn't seem possible.
Totally agree. I think the electric innovation credits or whatever was called in the greenhouse gas phase 2 was actually pretty prophetic by the EPA, actually, or predicted that I remember reading the rule saying, wow, this is, battery electric trucks. They're not going to happen. But, here we are. Now we have huge challenges. I wanted to bring up, maybe a lot of people don't know, and we've been kind of quiet about it, but EDF and CalSTART and NACFE RMI, we've been hosting an electric fleet our electric truck fleet readiness group for, I don't know, about 3 years now together. And it's been fun to work with fleets out there on the bleeding edge of this effort. Let's talk quickly about that. I mean, what are you proud of with that group, and how do you what would you say about those early adopting electric fleets?
I'm proud to be part of that, right? And I think that participating fleets have shared best practices amongst themselves and have also helped elevate an understanding about the challenges that these fleets on the bleeding edge are facing on their electrification journey. What are the conditions of success for fleets to be able to deploy electric vehicles? And I think that's really constructive framing, because it puts us on a solutions footing of not fighting about where's the technology today or what are the challenges and barriers today, which there are many and are well known, but it puts us in a grounding of where do we need to get to.
I'm proud of the group in that we talk about what's going on now, but with a clear understanding of where it's going to be soon. I mean, we know, for instance, we have 180 kilowatt kind of charging levels right now for heavy trucks, but we're going to get to 360 and 500 something, 550 soon. So as these fleets that are experiencing the trucks, I mean, they're not saying we're done here, that the weight isn't going to get better, the cost isn't going to get better, the charging times aren't going to get better. they know they are to some extent. So it's been fun to work with them
Yeah.
as they experience what it is now, knowing
Yeah.
what it's going to be, and then hoping for, better down the road in the future. So
And I mean, like, incredibly thankful for you in your leadership in that group, and for the fleets, right, who are doing this work. It's so inspiring, right?
I wanted to bring up policy and
Yeah.
regulations, and something we could talk about for an hour. We're going to talk about it only for a few minutes, but
Yeah.
you're my kind of phone a friend with respect to policy. When I wonder about what's going on in California or at the federal government level, very specifically about policy, I give you a call and you always help me think through it and so forth. So from the highest level, we're talking about real change here,
Yeah.
transformative kind of change. And regulations tend to be part of the front end of making those changes. I mean,
Sure.
industry wants to improve, but in a situation like this, it's really hard. So
Yeah.
um, tell us, the broad trucking audience. I mean, here's your shot at kind of telling us what do you want us to know, particularly maybe groups that are not involved in policy and regulations, either for their companies or at their companies. What should we know, and how should we approach these rules and regulations when it applies to the work we're trying to do?
The guidance that I would have is it is absolutely critical for solutions oriented people to engage. And it's critical because if solutions oriented people are not engaged, the conversation is then being framed by ideologues and naysayers. And so, I think about, like, the fleets at the leading edge here, really encouraging them to engage in a way that is about building the conditions for success, right? So, and I think that starts with an acknowledgement of the challenges that we have from an environmental perspective, and the importance and legitimacy of driving emissions down, both from a human health perspective and from a climate perspective, and the urgency of doing that, right? It's 2024, like, we desperately need to drive our emissions down in a really short time frame. Also, go in and thinking about, okay, with the constraints and challenges we have, what are the conditions we need for success, right? And I think if you have that mindset, whatever the specific policy discussion is, you're going to be constructive, right? And you're going to be able to help policymakers shape rules and regulations in a way that better work for the industry, and also meet the societal needs that we have to drive down emissions.
Hey, one thing specific on regulations, and I would point at the greenhouse gas rules. I mean, there's always two documents released when the final rule is put out. There's I guess the regulation, and then there's a regulatory impact analysis. And I
Yes.
always encourage people, these typically for the GHG phase 1, 2, and 3, these have been 500 to 700 page documents, each one of them. But I always encourage people to get to the regulatory impact analysis. I think I have that right.
Yes.
And I always encourage them to go there. I mean, that's pretty do of the rationale and what the impact, both I guess positive and negative, are. Can you explain that a little bit? Do I have that right? And would you do the same? Encourage people to really dig into those?
I think those are great. They're great resources to understand the specifics of the regulations. I would think that it is definitely worth spending some time, right, looking at those documents, even looking at the agency puts forward, I think like an 8-page summary of the rule, and to understand those. And I also think calling the agency, the staff at the EPA that are working on this, right, are clearly interested in having conversations with fleets. There's been a lot of outreach, and I think that part of their responsibility is to make sure that there is an understanding amongst critical stakeholders. So I would definitely think that I'd say read the summary. If you definitely go into those documents, you want to get into the background and the assumptions, feel free to give me a call. Always happy to speak with anyone, helping to understand things like EPA 3. And then also think about reaching out directly to the regulatory agency and having a conversation to make sure that you're understanding the rules and the policies.
That's very good advice. I do want to, again, appreciate EDF's approach and yours personally. It's one where you listen to understand. It's a balanced approach. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, Jason. It's been really insightful, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Rosen Friends.